Okay, very good. Hello again. Thank you. I was the one that discussed with our colleagues to cut a little bit the program and have only one round of the clinics because we thought we are running late and you all have been so engaged in the discussion, so we thought, okay, let's rather focus on reporting back and on the conclusions, and we will be also calling it a day in about an hour or so. So without any delay, I would say that we have reporting back from the agriculture, water, from the energy, and from the short-lived climate pollutants, as well as the forest and land use breakout groups. Today was the sector day, so to speak, and I would just go in order of this panel and ask Anna to start with the feedback on the the agriculture and water feedback from your elaborations.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Yeah, just a few reflections on some of the main messages that emerged from the discussions in the agriculture and water thematic table this morning. So, well, first of all, definitely the discussions and interventions from countries reinforced the importance of these two sectors, agriculture and water, in terms of addressing climate change, both through adaptation and mitigation in the countries. We discussed some experiences on integrating the sectors in NDCs, some of the challenges that have been experienced, but also looking forward into where countries see opportunities for perhaps filling some gaps or addressing these challenges and capitalizing on opportunities. Some kind of common threads and key messages that emerged were the strengthened need, but also this trend towards strengthened coordination efforts so across sectors, but also between the national and sub-national levels. So we've heard from several countries that have worked to enhance the processes for really having a more bottom-up process of understanding what the needs are at the subnational level and even at the community level for these sectors, and then bringing that up into the national NDC process. And at the same time, coordination across sectors, countries shared on the mechanisms that they have both for technical coordination, but also kind of financial coordination for these sectors, and kind of underlying also the important interlinkages and the nexus between, for example, agriculture and water, but also between water and energy from a mitigation perspective. We heard a couple of examples that I thought was interesting and very nice to hear is how countries are drawing on other ongoing processes, such as the national adaptation planning process or the technology needs assessment, in their NDC elaboration, where, for example, they're learning from or drawing data and information from vulnerability assessments being undertaken under the NAP process to better inform the NDCs in these two sectors in particular. And then I would maybe highlight the emphasis that was given to improved partnerships with both private and public sector to address or to increase producer access to finance and insurance, as well as to climate and weather information that are of importance for both agriculture and water sector. Finally, one key challenge that kind of emerged at the end of the session and that we didn't really have the time to delve into in more detail, but it was raised that in many ways these sectors are quite well considered in the NDCs, even though we did identify key gaps in terms of concrete actions and in particular taking it to the concrete target level. But even where the consideration of the sectors is strong, there's really the question of how do we enable action, enable better flows of finance and investment into enhancing the implementation of the priority actions that have been identified. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Hello. Good evening.
Edie with energy.
Okay, thank you so much, Romeo. Now, coming over to the thematic table on energy transition, our session sought to explore the approaches, various approaches for integrating the various sectoral opportunities in new NDCs in a nationally determined manner. And we tackled a couple of questions. One of the first questions was on trying to look at how cooling as an adaptation and mitigation option is considered in national NDC updates. And the guiding question was to understand, are countries ready to incorporate cooling into the next NDCs? Now, we had several examples from a number of countries, Mauritania, Senegal, Burkina Faso, Guinea, among others. And the general observation is that countries are really making incredible efforts to incorporate cooling in their NDCs. For instance, if I'm to give you a number of examples, countries are considering cooling in their building codes. To give the example of Mauritania, Mauritania is focusing on energy efficiency in buildings, and they are doing this holistically by incorporating local materials and other local solutions. And this is supported by national energy efficiency strategies. Now, another example is the integration of energy transition in buildings as part of just energy transition plans, that's JETPs. And to give you this example, Senegal is integrating cooling into the energy transition in buildings as part of JETPs. Moving on to the next example is the integration or a focus on energy efficiency. And Togo is doing an incredible job, has done a national plan that focuses on energy efficiency, green buildings, and they are having a long-term plan for 2030, which is being updated currently. Now, moving on to another example is countries are taking an whole systems approach to incorporating cooling across all sectors. And to give an incredible example, Nigeria has concrete steps to improve their next NDCs, which includes on how to mainstream cooling into multiple sectors and trying to tap into the win-wins that come with an all systems approach. For example, clean cooking, energy efficiency, adoption of building codes, as well as a focus on how efficient cooling can help mitigate or address the issue of post-harvest losses. Moving on to the next item that we tackled, that's on core benefits of sustainable energy in buildings, in building resilience in new NDC. Countries have seen the immense potential and multiple benefits akin to sustainable energy. And in this sense, we saw the example of Ethiopia, where the government is seriously considering the core benefits of sustainable energy and tapping into these core benefits by focusing on the expansion of energy transition lines. That's the grid, doing green buildings, shifting to clean cooking, and focusing on energy efficient appliances. Nigeria also is looking at the core benefits from the lens of job creation. They are doing a green job assessment, and they are projecting towards the creation of a total of 3 million additional jobs as a core benefit of sustainable energy transition. And this is through the emphasis of a system-wide approach to resilience building. Countries are also emphasizing minimum energy performance standards to unlock the myriad of core benefits, which include the potential to extend the grid energy to staff populations, populations that do not have access to electricity already. Now, coming over to the third item that we tackled, that is on looking on gaps and challenges that the countries anticipate in the energy sector. Countries lack the technical capacity to support the realization of goals under the new NDCs. And in this sense, or in this challenge, countries are therefore seeking capacity gap to fill these needs through skills transfer, technology transfer, and finances. And we saw another challenge whereby countries currently specific ministries responsible for the development of the upcoming NDCs are working in silos. In this sense, we end up losing on the contribution and synergies akin to working with the other sectors and ministries. So to resolve this, countries need a system-wide view and whole systems approach when developing their NDCs so as to leverage the potential of all other sectors. Additionally, a shift in the energy sector comes with a strong financial implications. And this is really challenging for most countries. And to this end, adoption has been slow and mostly relegated to the control of the private sector. Now, another challenge that was shared by the countries is the demand side behavior, which is a challenge, and it's difficult to convince target populations to really adopt new solutions without advocacy. So it's upon countries to really build on and try to socialize these NDCs with the populations and ensure that they get that buy-in. Now, another challenge is that most technologies are imported at very high cost, and if we are to get that sustainability and unlock the core benefits, we really need to build local capacities, which will ensure that we lower the cost while also promoting local economic growth. Coming to the last item that we tackle is tracking the progress and achievement to be undertaken to ensure that energy, cooling targets are included in NDCs. So countries are proposing that we need to really set up dedicated units in ministries to support the transition to sustainable energy and socialize these solutions with the masses to ensure that the tracking of progress and lessons are communicated. Another proposal was the need to build the capacity of national focal points to be able to use the new tracking tools used by the convention. Another proposal was the need to do regular inventory tracking to ensure rigor, transparency, and consistency of data, while also countries are imploring the use of similar tools and methodologies in tracking progress. Finally, some countries lack a proper working MRV system, and to enable them to do this tracking, they are really calling upon partners to really support them develop these systems. Thank you so much.
Wonderful, thank you very much. Over to you, Joseph.
Yeah, thank you. I'm reporting on the short-lived climate pollutant. Well, during the discussion, we were first reminded on the short-lived climate pollutant. Their contribution, they all contribute almost 45% of the whole greenhouse gases emission, and they cut across all sectors. You can find them in agriculture, waste, transport. So short-lived climate pollutants, they are found in different sectors. So to implement, the first question was, what are the countries doing? Now, to implement measures, we need action plans. So several countries have reported that they have several action plans. Countries like Nigeria, Ethiopia, Kenya, and Liberia. So for information, Liberia today, they launched the National Action Plan on Short-Lived Climate Pollutant today, so which was another great achievement. Other countries like Rwanda and Uganda, they are still developing the methane roadmap and National Action Plan on Short-Lived Climate Pollutant. Also, other countries like Malawi, Tanzania, and Ethiopia, they don't have these plans, so which is a need for these countries to develop the plan. Now, to implement this plan, we need an implementation. Some policies has been put in place, like policies and strategies. We are raising awareness to integrate short-lived climate pollutant in those plans. There are measures to reduce methane, especially in agriculture and waste sector, and there is a need to conduct assessment so that the actions and mitigation be informed by data. So there is investment needed to implement the developed plans. Some of the countries, they have invested, like in the promotion of e-mobility. They have put in place incentives for electric cars, clean cooking technologies, expansion of renewable energies, then introduction of emission testing for some countries like Rwanda, Uganda, Nigeria. So they're testing emissions from cars so that we can reduce these emissions. Other countries, they are phasing out hydrofluorocarbons. Then they are developing MRVs. Countries like Nigeria, they are following the guidelines developed by Climate and Clean Air Coalition to integrate short-lived climate pollutant in different sectors. Also, countries like Nigeria, they are developing guidelines for leaks, and they are harnessing methane generations into domestic cooling. Countries like Rwanda, they have established an African Center of Excellence for Sustainable Cooling and cold chain. Then they are promoting car-free days and car-free zones for non-authorized motorcycle. So they have carbon market framework, REME. Then they have even established unit, climate change unit within the Ministry of Finance to track this finance. Countries like Uganda, they are assembling electric cars in their country. They also have some of the private sector which are working to manufacture cooling systems which are free of hydrochlorofluorocarbons. So we need to enhance our measures to include short-lived climate pollutant into NDC 3.0. So what is needed? We need to align our policy and integration so that climate short pollutant mitigation strategies be aligned with the existing policies or the country policies. We also need to collect data and we need to do monitoring so that the actions be informed by the data. We need finance so that we can integrate short-lived climate pollutant mitigations. We also need stakeholder engagement. So we need to engage from policies, local communities, agencies, development partners. Everyone needs to be engaged so that all activities, they include short-lived climate pollutant. So we need also technology to do this. We need public awareness and advocacy. Then we need also capacity building. So we need capacity building from policy levels, technical levels, implementing agencies so that we can implement short-lived climate pollutant and integrate them in the revised NDCs. Now, what are the opportunities, challenges, and the lesson learned? For the challenges, well, most of the country reported a challenge of private sector integrations. Private sector have not been so highly involved in the measures. We need to engage leaders. There is a need for high-level willingness to take up the measures related to short-lived climate pollutant. Another challenge is the financial constraint to implement the adaptation. The challenge also is the capacity building, especially for technical people, institutions, and implementing agencies. There is a need for capacity building to understand and integrate the measures. There is also a challenge on technology transfer and sector coordinations. As these short-lived climate pollutants are from different sectors, there is a need for a holistic coordination between sectors so that all sectors can integrate short-lived climate pollutant into their plan. But there is opportunities. Several agencies, several organizations, they are coming up to support these measures. There is CCSC, Climate and Clean Air Coalition, and the other partners. There is in other initiatives like Global Methane Pledge, GCF. All this can help government or implementing agencies to integrate these measures. There is also an opportunity for public sector. Public sector also, they can find themselves in doing businesses which actually integrate or which works on one of the short-lived climate pollutant. And it is a good opportunity for the public sector to engage in this domain. There is a required support. There is need for resource mobilization, capacity building at all levels. CCS and partner state should consider additional support, especially financial and capacity building for member states to include short-lived climate pollutant into NDCs. The country like Ethiopia, Tanzania, and Malawi requested for special support. They don't have any action plan. They don't have any methane reduction roadmap, so they requested for special support in this era. They also need an attention to integrate short-lived climate pollutant into the new NDCs. We have a call for everyone. We are all called to join the effort to include short-lived climate pollutant into new NDCs, and everyone is reminded to stop methane emission and reduce short-lived climate pollutant, and the time to do it is now. Thank you.
Ready? Okay. Ronan first. And
thank you. Thank you. I was a moderator with Bernardin from UNDP for the forest and land use, and we had sessions both in French and in English. We had no note taker, but we had an agreement, and at the last minute I was told to try and cover this session. So you'll bear with me if I sound scattered, but I was in the group. So we had 3 questions to respond to. One was, what practical steps can be taken to overcome the current gaps in ambition and specificity in NDCs, particularly with high rates of deforestation? So the statistics show that at least 40% of carbon emissions in Africa are caused in the forestry sector. Some countries report even higher statistics, like Zambia, for example, it's over 70%. So the need is very clear, according to the statistics, to address this. So we looked at a few areas where practical steps can be taken. One of the issues that came up from countries that I think I don't want to quote because I don't know if they'll be comfortable to be quoted here, was the political will to actually implement policies that will make an impact on reducing carbon emissions in the forestry sector. And the biggest deterrent here was because most of the tenure is not formal tenure, where most natural resources are. In the southern part of Africa, it was clear that there's over 80% of the tenure is traditional land, and traditional land managed under traditional authorities that have different interests and relationships with government. So that's where most deforestation is taking place, using wood for fuel, and so one of the recommendations that came up was to provide an enabling framework that is actually enforceable. And the key leader here was political will. So Ethiopia gave us an example that they link their NDCs with national development plans. And the leadership of this implementation is actually through the Prime Minister's office in what they call the Green Legacy Initiative. Right now, I think they're already in the process of promoting planting of 7.5 billion new trees. So under the leadership of the Prime Minister, there's hope that it will be realized. So this is an example of one way where political will can actually go a long way in implementing NDCs. Another thing that came up was institutional arrangement. The climate change rationale is not understood the same way. It is some strong ministries look at it as a way of attracting capital, whereas other ministries that should be implementing or streamlining climate change processes end up competing with different priorities and not get the right resources. So Lesotho gave us an example that most recently, if I may quote her words, for the first time there is one Ministry of Environment, Forestry and Climate Change that is actually leading the process. And the initial or previous institutional friction is no longer a problem, and they see that the NDC they are developing now will have a bigger chance to be achieved. Lesotho also mentioned that the rate at which they've been implementing the NDCs is not at the same rate as most of the countries that were in that room are at. For them, they're actually still on NDC 2.0. Another issue that came up as a problem is the competing needs for forest resources, especially as a source of energy for communities. So Mozambique gave us an example that for them, after carrying out an assessment of the extent to which agriculture, forestry, and land use contributes to emissions due to the use of firewood for cooking, the government has taken a strategy for to promote alternative sources, alternative energy sources. Another thing that came up, although we did not get enough time to discuss about it, was ways to monitor and track NDC's contributions towards reducing emissions in the agriculture, forestry, and land use sector. It was a recommendation that NDC 3.0 should include specific indicators and targets that address the agriculture, forestry, and land use. The second question was what innovative financing mechanisms can be developed or scaled up to unlock the necessary funds for forest and nature-based solutions initiatives. Here, although we did not have a lot of examples from other countries that were in the room, there was a mention of mobilizing private sector funding and also governments providing public finance. However, the UNDP that had prepared this session and were not able to be here sent a document indicating what innovative financing can be accessed or utilized. So if you don't mind, I'm going to use this information to at least provide some tools. We talked about bonds, but as we talked about bonds, we also have private sector-led bonds, as well as local development banks leading bonds. We are given an example of a Brazil sovereign sustainable bond, which was issued to fundraise sustainable projects, including forest conservation efforts and renewable energy projects. Then public-private partnerships. We are given an example of California's Forest Resilience Bond, which is a PPP designed to finance forest restoration efforts, reducing wildfire risks by investing in forest health. Then we also touched briefly about emerging financing instruments like blended finance, where the government actually catalyzes participation of the private sector to generate climate finance and the investment in the affordable sector. Then the third question was, in what way can successful case studies from different regions be adapted or scaled up to enhance the integration of forests and nature-based solutions in NDCs? We discussed about best practices, which actually were leaning towards an integrated approach for landscape development, community-based management practices, where it's multi-sectors being attended to. Then we gave an example of a project in Zambia that was funded by the World Bank in partnership with biocarbon partners and had a REDD+ component, as well as GEF fund. There was also Jeff grant. This project was an integrated landscape development project that was looking at, one, improving livelihoods, as well as low emission, targeting low emissions. So it had two components. One was the enabling environment, whereas the second component was on forestry and agriculture, climate smart agriculture. So the enabling policies looked at smart land use planning, as well as laying out the framework for emissions reduction reporting and monitoring, as well as a framework to support carbon trading. In fact, as a follow-up of that project was a carbon markets project worth $63 million. So an integrated landscape development approach can harness benefits, both monetary and non-monetary, that can improve livelihoods as well as address forestation issues like planting new forests, climate smart agriculture, improving the quality of food in communities, as well as planting resilience crops, and also the wildlife component. So the idea was an integrated landscape approach can actually be one of the ways in which full targets can be met in NDCs. Thank you. I think we did those three. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I don't think I can conclude or can summarize this, but I think what we heard across the board triggered some associations. And from agriculture and water, I was thinking about Brazil right now and the Rio Negro being dried up almost entirely, with the Amazon having a tipping point there. I think we will hear, and I thought about COP 29 and COP 30. We will hear a lot from Brazil about this, because this is really transformational in the most negative sense that we can even imagine. And on energy, Edie, I think what we also see is, and I'm going to go to Kenya next week to work on this APRA initiative from IRENA with 7 countries in Africa, where, which is basically a psychotherapy almost for environmental focal points of climate and energy ministries, to stop being either or and in competition, rather than and seeing what kind of opportunities there are to leapfrog from no access to clean access. This is one important part, and obviously the entire discourse around transformation of existing energy resources. And on the short-lived pollutants, I think we need to really get the data right and make the right decisions. It's an economic decision, I think, right? Because you have them; they're so exponentially critical in terms of their danger to the climate, that one needs to take these kind of paths and economic decisions to make sure that you reduce where it's easiest to reduce, and to make sure that you are not locking yourself into industries or pollutants that can be avoided. You mentioned the cooling systems. I think that's a very important one. And on forests, I think on forests, Lee White came to my mind, who was the Minister of Environment and Forestry in Gabon. And we had a huge discussion once where he was telling my boss that at a COP where it's so unfair and so tricky. They're like a carbon sink, and they're told to preserve their forests. And he also mentioned, and I know that, that there's almost no natural forest left in Europe, right? And what are you giving us for that? You don't even allow us to export our wood, and what do we live from? And I think what he made the point for was a fair kind of transfer of funding in terms of the carbon pricing model that was there. And I think he achieved quite a lot back then with with a RED Plus mechanism. So quite interesting examples coming to mind. And I think that gives us a little bit of an outlook to tomorrow. But before we do that and we conclude the day, I guess we have rapporteurs also from the clinics, right? And I ask my colleagues from UNEP to help me a little bit. And with that, I think you deserve a round of applause for wrapping this up. And thank you so much for doing this also on such a short notice. And if you have questions, I mean, maybe we can save that for after the clinic presentation. Sophie, Jérôme, are we good? Oh, you're staying? That's good. Ah, that's good. Some continuity. Then we have Ben. Okay. Voilà. It's you. Mary, Ben, and Anna. We don't have a fourth one, right? Okay. Okay. So we started from left to right. Should we now start from right to left? I think that's good. Ben, you want to kick us off?
Okay. Yeah, thank you. Bon, moi, je vais aller en français puisque j'étais dans le groupe francophone. Donc, moi, c'est Benjamin Diabari Komna. Je viens de Climate Analytics et j'ai eu la chance de participer au groupe de discussion sur, en tout cas pour les pays francophones. Bon, j'ai été pris à l'improviste de prendre des notes, donc je vais quand même faire l'effort de faire une synthèse fidèle par rapport à ce qui a été dit. Donc, le groupe francophone, comme tous les autres groupes, nous avons travaillé sur les aspects de transfert de technologie et de renforcement de capacités. Donc, nous avons eu la chance d'avoir les experts qui ont soutenu les discussions, notamment Telvin de Agnès. Nous avons également eu l'accompagnement de Evalve de la GIZ Rwanda. Donc, et au cours de cette discussion, ils ont eu à introduire le sujet qui fait objet de discussion et à apporter un contexte pour pouvoir nourrir les débats. Donc, l'expert de Agnès a profité de l'occasion pour présenter la structure et également les différentes activités qu'ils sont en train de conduire et des appuis qu'ils apportent aux différents pays dans le domaine. Et avant de commencer, il a également structuré un rappel de besoins qui ont été identifiés par les pays suite aux travaux d'hier, notamment les défis en termes de données qui se résument au problème d'outils, de collecte et d'analyse des données, au manque de capacités techniques pour analyser et pour collecter et analyser ces données. Donc également l'assurance qualité des données qui sont collectées par les différents services techniques. Donc en ce qui concerne les défis institutionnels, donc il a rappelé qu'il y a 3 points qui ont été mentionnés, notamment le manque de capacité pour coordonner la mise en œuvre des CDN, y compris la collecte des données, le suivi des progrès. Donc, la faible expertise des ministères sectoriels, donc notamment les cadres et techniciens, donc en termes de collecte et d'analyse des données, et l'absence d'un cadre de coordination robuste. Et pour finir, le 3e point, défi et mobilisation des ressources. Donc, il a synthétisé en disant que hier, les besoins qui ont été identifiés, ou bien les gaps qui ont été identifiés, c'est le manque de capacité pour élaborer des projets, notamment l'ajustation climatique, donc qui est en lien également avec les données. Et aussi le fait que les agents techniques au niveau national ne disposent pas d'expertise qu'il faut pour pouvoir monter les projets. Donc ce rappel a permis quand même de contextualiser les discussions et vraiment orienter. Et le groupe de la francophonie, ou bien le groupe francophone, pardon, donc, a également suivi les 4 questions principales qui ont été abordées par tous les autres groupes, et en commençant par sur les besoins réels en termes de renforcement des capacités, et les pays ont mentionné le fait que la question même de changement climatique n'est pas maîtrisée par l'ensemble des acteurs. Donc, c'est souvent les ministères en charge de l'environnement qui ont une connaissance approfondie. Donc, ce qui fait que cela pose problème pour les autres secteurs, non seulement de s'engager, mais aussi de collecter les données qu'il faut pour mettre à disposition des acteurs. Donc, il y a les besoins aussi de faire un inventaire des techniques et technologies disponibles et leur niveau d'applicabilité. Donc, il ne s'agira pas juste de lister les techniques, les technologies disponibles, mais de faire des analyses pour voir quel est le degré d'applicabilité et d'appropriation par les pays. Donc, c'est un aspect qui est très important pour les pays. Et c'est là que la question des documents d'évaluation des besoins en technologie a été mentionnée. Et les pays ont soulevé qu'ils ont des documents, seulement un seul pays parmi ceux qui étaient là-bas, qui n'a pas encore développé son document. Mais le problème, c'est que c'est des documents qui datent il y a 5-4 ans, donc qui ont besoin des mises à jour. Et les pays ont également soulevé les besoins de transfert effectif des technologies, donc, et surtout également leur développement sur place. Et pour finir ce point, donc les pays ont mentionné les besoins en financement. Donc, il y a des techniques, des technologies qui sont disponibles, mais les pays n'ont pas de financement pour pouvoir implémenter ces technologies. Donc, un besoin de financement est crucial pour les pays francophones. Et la question d'aborder les aspects de la collecte et de l'analyse des données, et les pays ont mentionné qu'ils ont des besoins en termes de renforcement des capacités, notamment les experts nationaux, sur les outils d'analyse des données afin d'assurer l'appropriation au niveau national. Parce que le plus souvent, c'est des experts au niveau international qui sont sollicités pour faire ces modélisations ou bien faire des analyses. Mais une fois que le contrat de l'expert est fini, donc le pays se retrouve en difficulté pour pouvoir continuer le travail s'il y a des réagissements à faire. Donc c'est très important l'appropriation par les pays en ce qui concerne les outils de collecte et d'analyse de données, y compris les modélisations dans le cadre des CDN et d'autres actions climatiques. Donc les pays reconnaissent quand même qu'ils bénéficient d'un certain nombre d'appuis techniques, mais ils déplorent que cet appui n'est pas vraiment effectif, c'est-à-dire n'est pas durable, pérenne. Donc les pays bénéficient parfois de 2-3 jours de formation sur un outil ou bien sur une thématique donnée. Donc, ce qui fait que vraiment, ce n'est pas facile de pouvoir avoir une maîtrise de ces outils-là. Et il y a aussi des formations. Aujourd'hui, la donne, c'est de les faire en ligne. Donc, du coup, cela pose problème, surtout que dans nos pays, le problème de connexion se pose avec acuité. Donc, ce qui fait que ce n'est pas des programmes de renforcement de capacité durables. Et les pays ont également besoin de la mise en place des systèmes de collecte systématique des données. Donc, il ne suffit pas de collecter les données qu'il faut collecter, mais il faut vraiment asseoir des systèmes qui puissent permettre de collecter de façon systématique au niveau de chaque secteur les données et que les données soient remontées au niveau des utilisateurs. Et également étendre les services statistiques à tous les secteurs. OK. Donc, la question sur les institutions, les pays ont demandé ou bien ont manifesté le besoin de renforcement de capacités institutionnelles, notamment la coordination. Donc, la mise en place des coordinations robustes pour pouvoir gérer l'ensemble des secteurs et aussi la collecte des données. Dans des cas, des partages d'expérience ont été faits par certains des pays, donc, qui peuvent être capitalisés dans le cadre de la mise en place de ces systèmes. Et pour finir, en termes de renforcement de capacités ou bien de programmes pour renforcer les capacités, dont les pays sont revenus sur le fait qu'il faut vraiment un cadre, un programme robuste de renforcement des capacités. Et certains pays ont souhaité donc, de soumettre des formulaires pour identifier des besoins spécifiques de chaque pays. Et cela permettra de cadrer les programmes de renforcement de capacités et impliquer aussi davantage d'autres institutions comme les secteurs de l'économie, donc pour la modélisation économique et également d'autres secteurs qui ne sont pas les moindres, mais peut-être qui ne sont pas largement touchés par les aspects de changement climatique. Et pour finir, les pays ont demandé du soutien pour l'opérationnalisation des systèmes MRV. Donc, certains pays ont déjà fait, donc il faut les opérationnaliser et aussi assurer leur adaptabilité en fonction de l'évolution des politiques et des prises de décision en matière du changement climatique. Donc, voici un peu, de façon résumée, les discussions, les résultats de discussion des pays francophones. Merci.
Thank you very much. I think this commonalities across the countries and at the same time the differences that we see came through quite well. Thank you so much. And of course, data, data, data. Mary.
Good afternoon again. Good afternoon, everyone. I know it's a sleepy time, so I'm going to be as fast as possible. So we led the session with John from UNICEF. Hi, John. In regards to inclusivity, one of the main thing, and I think the previous speaker has really brought out, is on coordination, which is one of the challenges that was really brought up. So the setup was a semi-majlis kind of session. So it was not panel, where different participants talked about their experiences and what recommendations that they would give. So I'll go through that. The first question that we tackled was, how can we establish an inclusive NDC process? Which processes and mechanisms can you put in place to engage stakeholders, right holders in the design, implementation of the next round of NDCs? Which policies, institutional arrangement, resources do you need? And what bottlenecks for such inclusive processes? So in a nutshell, we noted that inclusivity should be rooted in national policies and laws to ensure that there is implementation and adherence. Stakeholder participation is also needed all through the development and implementation of NDCs. This helps ensure that all voices are considered, particularly across all sectors. Notably, we also noted about intergenerational equity, that is making decisions not only for the current generations, but also future generations. Coordination between different institutions and sectors may be challenging, for example, issues on bureaucracy. The system-wide medium-term strategies have the potential to support the development of inclusive NDCs and should be promoted by the countries. On challenges, while you have strong policies and regulations, and as I mentioned, one of the challenges before, which is coordination challenges, the other challenge is on the execution of the policies and regulations. We pay lip service to the same policies that we struggle to establish. There is need to share and learn from existing best practices, which can be borrowed from the implementation of NDC 2.0. On monitoring, evaluation, and reporting systems, on how to improve them to ensure that there is more inclusive NDCs, we noted that countries should set up and operationalize MVR systems that will enable them to monitor and track progress against policy indicators in place. There is a need to integrate and mainstream monitoring frameworks across institutions to ensure compliance. And we also need to adopt feasible indicators and adapting to our special circumstances will also make the reporting process meaningful. There is a concern that current indicators may not reflect an inclusive approach, and going forward, we need the revision of current indicators. On the next steps that we can undertake to improve inclusivity in NDCs processes, like the actions and MER, transparent and accountable frameworks addition when improving inclusivity processes, better coordination in ensuring inclusivity. Coordination may be between different government institutions, or it might be between different people in the society, that is from grassroots level to county level, or if it's district level, depending on the jurisdiction, to the national level. Mainstreaming national policies with NDC, like data collection, to ensure that we leverage procedural win-wins. I'm sure data has already been touched a lot in our conversations. There's a need to bring urgency and ambition of marginalized groups like women, children, and young people in shaping the next round of NDCs. Also, as we've noted before, revision of indicators. How then do we see that we are rightly including the people that we need to include? And finally, there's a need to go an extra mile to ensure that the local populations fully understand the NDC process, including implementation. And in this case, it is important to bring sectors from all sectors on board who can help synthesize and break down the NDCs for the benefit of all. In this sense, we all get full ownership of the NDCs that we're developing. And thank you.
Thank you so much, and I think without further ado, I hand over to Anna to enlighten us on the last clinic's topics and takeaways.
Thank you. All right, so our enabler clinic was on regulatory frameworks, and it was a very rich discussion, countries sharing their experiences on regulatory policy frameworks in their countries, what their current practices are, how the situations are evolving, what challenges and opportunities they see. I'm not sure if I'll be able to do justice to the richness of the discussion, but I've tried to pick out some common themes that I thought emerged under 4 overall aspects. So first of all, on the coordination of the NDC process and coordination of climate change more broadly in the countries. So even though the NDC process and climate change issues in general are often still coordinated by the ministries of environment, there's clearly been a lot of evolution and progress made in the engagement of other sectors that came out in many of the countries' interventions and contributions. Several countries shared how key sectors and ministries now often have climate change units integrated. And one particularly interesting trend that is clearly emerging is that more and more ministries of planning and ministries of finance and economy are being fully engaged in the climate change processes. And I'd like to quote the representative from Eswatini, who said that Ministry of Environment has been, for years doing NDCs and national adaptation plans, etc., until they realized that they have to walk the journey with the Ministry of Finance and Economic Planning, and that if they set the priorities together, and climate change is identified as one of those priorities, then it becomes easier also to access the necessary means of implementation and finance in particular. So that's clearly been a challenge. It's been a lesson learned in many countries, and real progress has been made, even though it does still remain a key challenge for some countries. Another challenge still under this coordination of NDC and climate change processes, another challenge that was identified was the proliferation of committees to coordinate environmental commitments. Sierra Leone shared their ambition of setting up an umbrella national committee where the different committees can come together so that they can harmonize better the reporting and planning and management, these various commitments at the national level. So things like national communications, BTRs, NBSAPs, etc. So their review and development. Also to better enhance the alignment and links between those documents and processes. So moving on to the second theme that I picked out, which is on governance of climate finance specifically. So there's an interesting common thread, again, running through the discussion where many countries shared how they have recently set up climate finance units or similar structures in their ministries of economy and finance to coordinate basically the governance of climate finance. There's several countries, including Gambia, Liberia, Nigeria, I think others as well, which have set up climate change funds or are in the process of doing so to facilitate access to and the administration of climate finance. Still on climate finance, we discussed specifically the complexity of building project documents that meet donor requirements as a major limitation in accessing climate finance. We talked a little bit about how to build capacity for framing projects, developing a climate rationale for a project, and I think one conclusion of the session was that it's really part of this solution is understanding really the emissions situation and likely trajectory and the adaptation needs, specifically in the national circumstances, building on really the local, drawing from the local context, understanding that local context, so that the climate rationale and adaptation rationale can be built in a way that makes investment sense, basically. Third theme that emerged was on regulatory frameworks specifically. So countries shared that many of them already have in place or are working towards a climate change act. This is in part often to address certain challenges that have been identified, such as the need to clarify the mandates of different institutions in the national climate change governance framework. And in some countries, subnational levels, for example, states in Nigeria are also being encouraged to adopt climate change acts. That brings me to my last theme, which is the link from national to subnational levels. So in Nigeria, again, the National Climate Change Council has offices at the subnational level to work with subnational councils to develop and implement policies and to help to strengthen that link between national and subnational levels. Liberia also shared an example. They have 15 counties with each having their county development agenda. And I think it's actually the NDC partnership, I think, that's supporting them to make those subnational county level development policies, to greening them and integrating climate change there. So that was another, this link from national to subnational is another theme that emerged. So from my perspective, maybe one way to summarize this discussion is that there's clearly a lot of kind of movement, a lot of evolution, quick evolution. Many of the countries were sharing very recent developments, within this year, or plans that are materializing in the next 6 months in terms of how the climate change governance frameworks are evolving in their countries. So I think this is an area where a lot of lessons have been learned and actions are being taken to update and enhance and strengthen the way that climate governance and coordination is organized, with the aim of better engaging key actors and improving efficiencies, but also to attract investment into adaptation and mitigation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Let's do 5 minutes of Q&A for this round and the other session. If there's any question from the side, any remarks from the audience, or are you ready to knock off? Any input? Also, we still have online participation, right? Here we go.
Right, maybe a very...
Marlena. Yes, we hear you.
All right, maybe a quick addition to what Anna reported was we also investigated links with the regional economic climate change strategies, whether the participants had an opportunity to understand what the regional economic communities have as their climate priorities that would then feed back into the climate change. So that's one area that we need to further investigate, because there hasn't been much of that work feeding into the NDC process. Thank you.
Thanks for that addition. No? I mean, if I was also asked to say a couple of concluding remarks. Oh yes. The sun is shining bright from there. Go ahead. Le représentant de Guinée, s'il vous plaît.
C'est juste pour rebondir sur ce que la dame vient de dire par rapport au lien avec les politiques régionales. Il faut avoir à l'esprit qu'aujourd'hui, le continent est structuré sous forme de 3 commissions ou de 4 commissions régionales climatiques qui fonctionnent depuis bientôt 3 ou 4 ans et qui travaillent justement sur ces aspects régionaux, sur le changement climatique et l'économie verte, qui sont alignés sur les CDN des pays. Donc là, il y a un lien déjà qui est établi dans ce sens-là. Donc les politiques régionales intègrent bien les CDN des pays. Merci.
Thank you. Looking into the audience. Good. I don't dare to summarize this rich discussion, and it can only be very, very simple, but I think when I look at this panel, the order was wrong. I should have started, from my point of view and from how we are thinking also a bit from the NDC partnership side, which is the platform where you all kind of connect to and where you all belong to. We think of you know, the inclusivity and the vision on one level, which translates, I think, into the highest level, the highest government level kind of commitments, heads of state, heads of government, which is so important to move things. And then we go to the policy level, where you see, like, across the cabinet, across the sectoral ministries, when they compete for resources, when they compete for attention, so to speak, and also interests, how important it is to give this guidance and to balance this out in ways that make this exchange a lively one and a constructive one. I think this is really important. This siloing of topics, you know, is extremely tricky, and it was not helpful. And thirdly, of course, the information. And that, by the way, I see Dr. Mukhtar here. Ethiopia, for instance, has also said, you know, it's nice, we have our climate change plan, but we are making our planning ministry in charge of climate. And that, of course, is something completely different than having the environmental ministry fighting for attention, fighting for the attention and the financial resources and the power to make strategic decisions around climate change. And thirdly, all of this needs to be certainly grounded on proper information and data, so that there's an upstream also channel that makes sure that these kind of various levels are providing the right triggers and incentives for the private sector, for subnational and so forth. So this really is beautiful in terms of the complexity. It shows the complexity, but it also shows how far we got. When we started, and when I started with dealing with climate, you know, there was not even an agricultural minister was not really aware of what the NDCs are. If you were lucky, he knew or she knew that the Paris Agreement exists, and not much more. Now, when you go to a COP, and you may think a COP is a crazy place to go, 120,000 people and so forth, what you see is a lot of exchange that goes just beyond the actual nerdy MRV, ETF kind of means of implementation discussion. And I think hitting the real economy and the real world from that side has been quite therapeutical for all sides and good to exchange. And I think with that, we are good to have a segue also to tomorrow, where we discuss how to get support, how to develop these third round of NDCs. How can you develop these as kind of plans that go much more beyond what an environmental ministry or what a UNFCCC focal point has to do, but how does this inform national planning, budgeting, and so forth on one hand, but also how do you and where do you find resources outside your own national resources to fund your NDCs and climate action at large. And I think that's what makes the day tomorrow even more interesting than the day today and yesterday. So we are like peaking to the next level tomorrow and look into the future and see how we can progress together, and what you also bring home in terms of the messaging to your colleagues. With that, I wish you a nice evening. Is there any housekeeping I'm forgetting? We meet each other straight 9 o'clock tomorrow in all freshness. Thank you so much. Très bien, merci.